Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
In order to be self-aware, self-knowledge must precede that. You don't have awareness without knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so you have to learn about yourself in order to be aware of the things that you do and how you're showing up.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan, and this is my friend and co-host, Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. So we're coming to you live from Dallas and New York today.
Yes, it's gorgeous here.
Well, good for you, because it's really sunny here, but man, is it a humdinger. It's 106 degrees.
I love it when we start an episode with humdinger. That's beautiful.
Again, just another little slippage, little grandmother in my blood. Humdinger. I am so excited to talk to you today because last night, Aaron and I, my husband, watched a football show.
What? Oh.
Okay. And so for those of you who are listening, pod members, Danelle loves football.
I do.
My husband loves football. And they like to talk about football. And usually I'm very lost whenever these discussions take place. Sort of. Especially when it comes to people and whatnot. Like I know all the positions and I know what the goal is in football.
Well, there's not a goal in football, but yeah, you mean you know the gist of how football works.
I know we're trying to make points by getting it across the goal line.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's funny. It's funny. See? Okay. Y'all are going to see how this works with me and Dee and me trying to talk smart football. Mm-hmm. Well, football season is coming.
Oh, I can't wait.
Right?
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
It's the most wonderful time. Who thought Christmas was the best time or the holidays? Nope.
Football.
At my house and at Dee's house, the best time of the year is football season. Mm-hmm. Well, Aaron teed up, hey, let's watch Hard Knocks, because I didn't realize this. Maybe I'm late to the party, but that's been recorded like in the last 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
Since training camp has been going on.
Right. It happens during training camp. Mm-hmm.
Which is now.
Yes.
So August. It's fresh. Mm-hmm. It's fresh, hot content.
Yep.
So we watched it. I guess the first episode. I don't know. Are there more? I don't know. I just watched it willingly.
Yeah, it's like a docuseries.
So good. It's so good. Mm-hmm. And why I loved it, which I didn't realize, was that the whole thing is about leadership.
Yeah. I mean, football in general. Yeah. Okay.
Well, somebody has said something. Somebody could have made the parallel. So, evidently, we do have a lot of, I want to talk about the quarterback of the Jets, Aaron Rodgers. Evidently, we have a lot of listeners in New York because we can see you. We can see your numbers. Thank y'all. We're so glad.
Well, I'm one of them.
You're one of them. Yes. And there are more. You can't listen to a podcast quite that much, Dee.
Oh, I know. There's others.
Yes. But this Aaron Rodgers character who is coming from Green Bay?
Yes. Green Bay. Mm-hmm.
Well, he is such a good leader. By the end of the show, I wanted to follow him right out into the field and catch his fun passes.
Okay.
That look like bullets coming down the field.
And did you say that to Aaron Zweig?
Yes.
The diehard Dallas Cowboy fan?
I didn't say that exactly. I said something more like, man, is he handsome?
Okay.
And can you throw the football like that?
All right. So what's the point here? Because I can't stand Aaron Rodgers. Sorry. Like he drives me. There's just, it's just.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. He has another coach. I can't remember his name, but all of y'all are going to watch this Hard Knocks show and you're going to see it. He has a coach. I think he's the defensive coordinator, which doesn't make sense. Maybe he's the offensive coordinator. That makes sense. That he's brought there from Green Bay. And Aaron Rodgers said that this coach will often say, when someone wants to do something that may be a little bit risky, or they want to offer a suggestion, he will say yes. And
your favorite, yes.
My favorite hook, line, and sinker, because yes, and frames things in a way that gives people permission to do the ask and add whatever it is you want or recommend that they add on to sweeten the deal.
Mm-hmm.
The minute they said it last night, I looked over at Aaron. He goes, yes, I know. Yes, and. So for those of you listening, if you haven't heard us talk about yes and before, yes and used to be a core value of DMAs when we had 7. We narrowed down our core values because we got 7. We had 5 too many. Now we only have 2, which is smart because we can rattle them off, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with yes and, the reason why we did that is from a service perspective, you don't say no. We're taught not to say no. Sometimes we need to say no or but. And in a different way to frame that in a more customer service centric way is by saying yes and. So for this offensive coordinator,
Mm-hmm.
his response to people is, yes, let's do that. And let's correct this, or let's try harder in this area, or let's focus on this. I loved it. Had to bring it up. Huge revelation on leadership last night watching Hard Knocks.
Oh, good. Good for you. I like that you're watching football, anything in general. So that makes me happy. I will not be tuning into the Hard Knocks season. I pick and choose which seasons I watch based on, my tolerance for the team. I actually do, I do kind of root for the Jets. I mean, they just have sucked for so long. Sorry, Jets fans out there. Maybe Aaron Rodgers can turn it around. We'll see.
Well, he's
at the end of his career, so it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do. I do hope he has a few seasons. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, and we can't deny that. It's just when you're a Cowboys fan, and then I don't know. I think he can be a bit arrogant, and so it'll be interesting to talk about your external presence today, because I think I'm sure he is a good leader, but there's just, I don't know. I'm sure there's a myriad of opinions out there about Aaron Rodgers, but I wish he and the Jets well.
Yes, we do. We wish everyone well, especially
not everyone, but
the Cowboys.
Oh, I'm talking about in relation to football. Let me correct that. We don't wish everyone well in football. No, we wish them good health, but we don't wish them wins or anything like that.
Okay, got it. But we wish Cowboys all the wins.
Yes, we do.
All right. Before we get into self-awareness, let's hop to this quick advertisement. Self-Smarter listeners, I'm so happy to share with you a little secret that we've been working on that is coming soon to you, our devoted listeners. In just a couple of weeks, we will have some of the tools and helpful information that we talk about each week on the podcast available to you. We are doing this because you've asked for it. We haven't had it to give you, and now we've been working hard here to prepare solutions that may be of service to you as you develop yourself and your teams. Stay tuned. I'll be back with more details soon, but just know our team cares so deeply about your success, and we hope this new evolution of Self-Smarter proves it to you. #excited. It's probably a good idea to tee up today. We're talking about developing your self-awareness skills.
Okay.
This is something that we've been talking about. This really is, quite frankly, the sort of crux or core of why we do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extremely large subject matter, and it has been, I'm going to say that I've been aware of over the last 5 years. You and I have been working on this longer than that, a decade at least. I don't know that we called it quote unquote self-awareness. We were just on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then we realized sort of midstream, oh, that's what this is.
Yeah, no, I think, and we have a previous episode on it, but it's emotional intelligence has definitely become more of a common topic in the leadership realm or in the business realm. Whereas I think it's been out there. I mean, self-help, that type of inspirational stuff has been around for a really long time. But I think we've started to frame it a bit differently around self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So yeah, this is... Can you be emotionally intelligent without self-awareness? No, you can't. It's a part of being emotionally intelligent is to be self-aware. Right. Yeah. But we're going to dive specifically deeper into self-awareness. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And really, this takes time. Mm-hmm. And that's what I kind of wanted to say up front is we have a lot to say. Dee's got a lot to share today because this is such a huge part of our lives and part of the way that we see leadership. Mm-hmm. And the evolution. And this is like a must in terms of someone's process. Yeah.
So we've got a lot to share. If you're here and you're listening, this is going to be a good one.
And I think too, like if you've been listening to our podcast or if you're new to us, welcome. And one of the reasons we started this podcast is because I was a good leader in many ways, but then I found out 8 years ago that I didn't have a good approval rating as a leader. And when I explored that rating in a deeper context, I realized, oh, wait a minute, they trust me. Mm-hmm. Okay, they do think I'm a capable leader to run this business, own this business, and lead in that capacity. But it was my lack of self-awareness about how I was communicating, how I was showing up. And so that's when the study and the journey began. And it began because I wanted to be, I didn't like that aspect that I was good at, doing the work and running the business, but not good with the people and making, being the type of leader that the way I show up can inspire and invite others to be a better version of themselves. And so, that is really why we started Self Smarter podcast, is because we've been on that journey to become self smarter ever since, I found that out. And self-awareness. And the thing before we really studied self-awareness as it, as we're going to talk about it today, is that we knew instinctively that self-awareness is it's internal work. And I think the least talked about aspect of self-awareness is the external work that's required. So I think we found some really great content to help us present this to you as leaders today of any kind. And I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's definitely something that I've learned a lot about and I'm constantly learning about. So it's exciting.
Another thing that came as a revelation to me in preparing for this was I read over and over again, more people on the planet are not self-aware.
No.
What it did say is that people aren't self-aware and they think they are self-aware. Maybe you see a mix of both, in your life and out there. But the bottom line is people really aren't.
Right. And I think it can be one of those terms, right? We've talked about this in the trust episode, is that, oh, I'm trustworthy.
Right.
Well, or I do trust people. And then you start to explore really where trust is fostered or how it's lost. And when you start to study it a little bit more, you can find yourself going, wait a minute, I have some work to do. And it's consciousness is really what this is. And so self-awareness, and, we have a belief that in order to be self-aware, self-knowledge must precede that. You don't have awareness without knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so you have to learn about yourself in order to be aware of the things that you do and how you're showing up. And I think that's what we had to learn in order to really gain, a deeper context around awareness. But yeah, I think most people would tell you they're self-aware. It's and it's the same thing with humility. And we have a whole episode on that. Am I humble? Am I a humble leader? Sure. I mean, most people aren't going to say no, but there's moments when we're just not. And so you may think, oh, I'm self-aware in some aspects, but then in other aspects of your life, you could completely not be. So anyway, I'm glad we're exploring this more because you've done a really good job of teeing up some information that was really good for me to be reminded of in some cases, but then to also learn from. So let's get going.
Okay. Why don't we start like we do every episode, Danelle? Why don't we start with a definition? Tell us a little bit more about self-awareness so that we sort of set the tone and the stage for what we're going to dive into.
Yeah, I think if looking at different definitions or how self-awareness is best described, we liked a version by Harvard Business Review, and it breaks self-awareness into two categories. And first and foremost is internal awareness, which represents how clearly we see our own values, passions, aspirations, and our reactions to everyday situations. The study in the article found that internal self-awareness is associated with higher job and relationship satisfaction, personal and social control, and general happiness. Alternatively, negatively, internal awareness can be related to anxiety, stress, and depression, which we've also talked about on here.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, this is referring to those moments when you feel, I think people don't all struggle with chronic anxiety. Here we go into buzzwords these days, but people do have they're anxious. We get anxious in certain moments, confrontation, naming one, speaking in public, naming another. There's this process that goes on internally that needs to be managed internally. It doesn't necessarily need to be externally processed, but we've got to get a handle first, be aware of those emotions, be aware of those situations that are driving those emotions, and so forth.
Yep, absolutely. And so I think there's a larger group of the population that has done the work on internal awareness from my conversations, many and hundreds of conversations around this. And then you can also almost see that too from a standpoint of the different types of assessments or the different types of books that are out there, the things that you can learn. There is a lot of information on how you can become more internally aware and work on those things. Where I find there to be less attention, but I do believe it's growing, is in the external awareness.
Okay.
That's my opinion. You may see it differently. And so relative to external awareness, that means the understanding how other people view us in terms of the same factors I mentioned before. The research shows that people who know how others see them are more skilled at showing empathy and taking others' perspectives. For leaders who see themselves as their employees do, their employees tend to have a better relationship with them, feel more satisfied with them, and see them as effective in general. So again, I want to further clarify what I was saying is I do think most of us have concern around how other people see us. So we're concerned about how other people are seeing us. But my point, to be even clearer, was I don't know that we're necessarily doing a lot of the, work on how are other people seeing me. So there's plenty of assessments to take, but a lot of the times it's just that one-on-one interaction of asking, how am I showing up? How am I doing? Did that make sense to you? Am I communicating well? Could I have done a better job in that presentation? Whatever it is, it's seeking that information from a trusted source back to you so that you can honestly, truly understand how people are seeing you. And so I think that's where we have a lot of work or a lot of opportunity, in my opinion, relative to the two different definitions or the two aspects of self-awareness, both internal and external.
Right. I think, for me, and everybody has their own moments of clarity where they realize either personally or professionally, I'm not self-aware externally in this moment, or maybe that's just me. I definitely do that now because I've gotten such a good handle on how I feel internally. It's time to work on external. One of the first things that I remember doing was I would notice when others around me got frustrated, not necessarily with me, but with behaviors of others. So for example, I'll give you just an easy one. You're at the grocery store, you're in the parking lot. There's all these cars trying to get down one way. And no matter what, there's somebody walking in the middle of the walkway on their phone with their head down. Put that person anywhere in the country or on the planet. They're not paying attention. They're totally into their phone and whatever that important thing is at the moment. And they're blocking up 6 rows of traffic while they that's what I call it, through the parking lot. That's just an easy example of, wait a minute, that's super frustrating. Like, I'm frustrated and these people I'm with are frustrated. Do I do that? Do I do that?
Right.
And what other ways in life am I holding up traffic?
Ooh, I like that.
You know what I mean? Am I holding up traffic when I hold court at a table? Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I don't allow for other people to speak. I get on a rant or whatever, and I get excited, and those are the kinds of things. And then I have to think, oh, that feels really good to me as a 9 in growth going to a 3 on the Enneagram. Yummy. But for those sitting across the table, they may be like, shut up.
Yeah.
We get it.
Right.
So it forces you to think about if there are things that you see in others externally that you're like, man, I wish they realized how that looked right now to all of us. It can teach you about yourself.
Yes.
So sometimes that external work comes from internal awareness.
Yeah. And it really, external work a lot comes from curiosity.
Yes.
I was curious at what y'all thought about me being a leader. I could have just asked you, but I hired someone to come in and, do an anonymous, basically, review of my performance. Yes. I was seeking that external knowledge. And there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
And then to your point, it's also, if you're internally aware and you're curious about your interaction with others, then you'll know how to navigate those moments when you can ask or seek that information, because you know how you are, and when it can be great and when it's all the others, right? We know the light and we know the shadow. And so we can, to me, the external is where we can actually put most of our awareness into practice.
Yes.
Right. So that's why I think it's so critical.
One of the things that you taught me, Danelle, was, and I actually executed on this weekend relative to external awareness. It's internal awareness first, then it translates to external, is you're really good at preparing for interactions with others. Like, I've seen you do that over the years. So for example, this weekend Aaron and I had dinner with a couple that came to our wedding 25 years ago. We just don't see them that often. And we'd like to circle back and like really start to nurture that relationship with them. We go to dinner. And before I go to dinner, hours before, I thought, I probably ought to just understand what they're going through right now. Like, where can I do that? This is what I learned from you. Social media. People post everything usually about their lives on social media. I am not good about that. I don't post everything, but you can probably guess what's going on when you look at someone's social media posts. I learned so much about what had been going on. I was sitting down, and in terms of my external presence, I wanted to be present in their terms. I didn't want to talk about myself. I am genuinely curious.
Yeah.
And followed up on things that I had seen on social media that I was able to say, how did that go? Or where are we now? And they loved it. I could tell they were into it. They were so excited. And it showed them that I do care, even though we haven't maintained the closest relationship over the last 25 years. We're willing and able to come back into it. And so thank you for that. That's a good way to bring internal, I don't know, I feel bad about that. And I also want to show up in a good way that's going to engage and make the best of this time together. That's showing up and externally expressing what it is that I found or what it is that I was genuinely curious about. So yeah, I wanted to elevate that to you.
Yeah. Well, good. Preparedness is good. Social media does help. And then sometimes you just go back to the old time, sure thing, ask genuine questions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, asking people questions really helps. So
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
You're going to share a little bit about archetypes, and at DMA, we love an archetype. So what are some archetypes relative to self-awareness?
And this is, again, continuing from the article from Harvard Business Review, but relative to self-awareness, they have presented 4 unique archetypes. And I thought it would be good to share, and we can discuss the archetypes and that we believe we are. So this is not an assessment or anything, but in the article, they describe the 4 archetypes that I'm going to share with you, and it's basically self-assessed. So that'll be interesting because we haven't discussed these archetypes before. And I think, so if we have internal awareness and external self-awareness, these archetypes are plotted and denoted as follows. The introspector. The first self-awareness archetype is if you are high on internal awareness but low on external awareness, you are the introspector. These people are clear on who they are, but they don't challenge their own views or search for blind spots by getting feedback from others. Over time, this can harm their relationships and limit their success.
Yeah.
So, and then the seekers, that's the second type. The second archetype is low on self-awareness and low on external awareness. This is not the quadrant you want to be in, but they are called the seekers. They really don't know. They don't know yet who they are or what they stand for and how they're being seen by others. So if you're a leader who is a seeker, you might feel stuck or frustrated with your performance in relationships. So again, if you think of the quadrant, 4 quadrants, that's basically how this is laid out. So the seekers are low in both internal and external awareness.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're a leader who's just been, you talk about it like anointed positions. Let's say you've been anointed into a leadership position, but you've not really ever held a leadership position, nor have you been given any type of coaching. Mm-hmm. Might find yourself in this quadrant.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong
as a
with
leader.
Realizing that you're in this. We've all been there.
Totally.
You don't necessarily show up as a leader because we don't believe leaders are born. We believe that they're made,
That's right.
And that's a decision. So when you're new to leadership, it's easy to fit yourself into the seeker category. Hell, I've been there a number of times. So, but what it means is we need to, because of this new responsibility, the way I look at it, I don't think of it as a role, I think of it as a responsibility, is it's time to learn more about ourselves internally and seek more feedback about ourselves externally. That's the way I see this. So
it is a lot of, I think to your point about this isn't the quadrant that you want to be in
for long.
You want to learn.
Right.
Like, right. You're a sponge and you're absorbing and you're learning a lot about yourself. And sometimes in this quadrant is where things come to reality and to the surface, and it can be sometimes hard for people to manage. So be excited about it if you're in this quadrant and buckle up.
Yeah. I want to get through the 4 and then I want to come back because I think we can talk about times when we have experienced all of them because again, and I think you made a good point, I want to make sure that our listeners realize that all 4 of these, it's okay to move in and out of them. And it just depends on what's going on in all aspects of your life. And when I was reading through it, I was like, oh, I was definitely in that seeker category in that moment. And this is where I found myself progressing into one of the other archetypes. So the third one is pleasers. And this group of people that are low on internal self-awareness and high on external awareness, and they were referred to again as the pleasers, which makes total sense, right? So they are seeking feedback from others. They care a lot about externally how people see them and how they're showing up, but they haven't done the work internally. So
yeah, I was the master at this. I am a master at this, I think. Master at being good at externally showing up as best as I can. I know I've got work to do there too, but being completely blame it on the 9 on the Enneagram. I don't know, but the internal self-awareness is very low, very low for me because I just care about others. And so that was really a hard thing to get my arms around. And I know we're going to talk about this more. I just want to validate people right out of the gate and denote that this is me on the page and I'm okay with it and managing through it every single day.
I could argue with that just working with you, but yes. Okay. All right. The 4th archetype is aware. And this is what we're all aiming to achieve on our self-awareness journey. And y'all can assume you know what this is high on internal and external awareness. And so therefore they deem this group the aware. So just to review, we have the introspector. So that is high on internal awareness, but low on external. Seekers are low on both internal and external self-awareness. And pleasers, they are low on internal and high on external. And then aware, they are high on both internal and external self-awareness. So I would say, again, if we start with the awareness, where that's ultimately where we would like to be relative to this awareness journey we're on, is to be high on both what we know and about ourselves and how we're wired and how we're driven. And we talk endlessly about different ways to do that on this podcast. And then also from an external standpoint. But I can tell you, I know that in the first part of me deciding that I wanted to be a different kind of leader than what I was, I spent a lot of time in the introspection of really learning about myself. But the interesting thing is that while I used external awareness, so I used a review basically from the employees of the company, I still wasn't seeking advice for a while. I was really focused on growing what I knew about myself as a leader because I just hadn't studied leadership in that way. And I wasn't studying leadership, but let me correct that. I hadn't taken the time to learn more about me and the way that I'm naturally wired and the way that I can show up both positively and negatively. And so I spent a lot of time as the introspector in the introspector archetype, and I can see that now. And then as we mentioned, the seeker archetype is when you're low on both. And I think we move in and out of that. I mean, clearly that's where I was prior to the 8 years ago, to the review. I was low on both, right? That's what got me there. And I mean, I knew about myself relative to my abilities. Mm-hmm. But remember, this is not about that. This is literally, again, our values, our passions, our desires. And personality does fit into that. Emotions fit into that. There's a lot that goes into that. And so clearly I was a seeker in that time. I was a seeker probably when we transitioned to you running the company. Mm-hmm. I spent most of my time in that preparation stage, which was about 2 years, getting you ready for this role. Mm-hmm. And I believe I did a darn good job at that. And I've talked about it on this episode quite a bit, and definitely talked about it on episode 34 when I vulnerably share my story a bit more, the current chapter of my story, I should say. But I didn't even think about me. Mm-hmm. I didn't think about what I was going to do. I sure as hell didn't think about how I was going to feel. So my internal awareness went down. And then externally, I was just kind of lost. And so I've been working to move myself from the seeker archetype towards being more aware. And I've used a lot of tools to do it. I've used therapy. I've used assessments. I've used lots of feedback from people that I trust. And I say lots of feedback from few people. I can say that. I don't cast a wide of net as I used to be comfortable with. I care about I care about more meaningful interactions than quantity of interactions, which is different for me in terms of where I've been in my life. And so I think when we can just have something that describes these things, what it does is it raises our consciousness. There's not a score for any of this. There is just, I am dedicated to being more internally aware and more externally aware. And when you're committed to it, you're most likely going to, if you'll listen and learn and live in trial and error and have grace and realize that it's not a sprint. And that there's a lot of practice that goes into this, right? You have to live in these things in order to get better at it. I think that's the big takeaway when we're studying self-awareness in these two ways, internally and externally.
Right. I love the notion, and I wasn't thinking about that at all until you just said it, of moving in and out of these different quadrants. If you were to map it out, it would end up being quadrants. You said that earlier. Mm-hmm. Moving in and out of them throughout life with the goal of being in awareness. Mm-hmm. You're in awareness for 5 years based on the situation or phase of life that you're in. And then you move, to your point, I moved to a different quadrant based on my circumstances.
Yeah. I can give you example. Like you're right now, I think you're in a real healthy, and again, we talk a lot about this as being good friends. I think you're in the awareness quadrant as it relates to your relationship with your teenage son, who just, oh my gosh, today, based on this recording, is his first day of his junior year. Cooper, I hope you have a kick-ass day. But you're very aware. But I can tell you right now, I know what's coming 2 years down the road. I know exactly where you're headed. You're both going to find yourself into that seeker category again, and you're going to have to move through that wherever Mr. Cooper's journey takes him. And you and Aaron are going to be staring down an empty nest. And there's going to be work that has to be done no matter how much you try to prepare for it until you can live in that time.
Right.
But if you go in with the mindset of I'm going to have some work to do, and I accept that and I look forward to it, and I'm going to set myself up to do some work internally, and I'm going to surround myself with some people externally that can help me navigate that portion of it too. And again, hopefully the time from the seeker archetype as you move to the aware archetype, hopefully it's short-lived. And that's what we ultimately want. I can say the same thing for new mothers in our office. I've watched them, where they were before they were pregnant with their babies. And then after the babies came, and I could sit down with any of the three of them and I could describe these archetypes just based on the way they were showing up in the workplace and the things that they were, dealing with and their level of awareness of that. And that's natural. That's the way it's supposed to be. And we could say the same thing for, our young people going off to college or people starting their career for the first. There's just, and I think if we can be more comfortable with that, but I think what we can easily buy into the notion of this, that once we are aware, we just stay aware. No. It can't work that way. And that's why we, when we've talked about this, and we definitely talked about it in multiple ways, but we believe there's self-knowledge. Then there's self-awareness. But it's critical to also accept that there must be agility. We have a whole episode on agility because that's what I learned. I learned, when I went through the time last summer when I admitted that I was dealing with, depression, is that I didn't give myself the grace of, I thought I'd done so much of this work. And then when I found myself a bit broken, I didn't realize, I got to be agile to move through all these changes in my life. I just didn't prepare for that. I prepared for it financially. I prepared for, literally the physical work or literally moving my daughter or, those type of things. But I just didn't think about it from the impact that it was going to have on me from an awareness standpoint. So if I can give you anything who care about this subject, we have to give ourselves some grace, and we have to give ourselves the ability to realize, whoa, there's a change coming. I'm going to need to be aware, like literally using that terminology in a bit different way. But I'm going to have to understand that there's going to be some work that needs to be done both internally and externally, because this is a big change in my life. And hopefully most of the big changes in your life, they're coming. And I know life is going to throw us the times when we don't expect something. And when it's great, yay, that can also change our level of awareness. But it can also be in the negative times when we really lose ourselves in both of these areas, internally and externally. So that's a time to really pay attention when you can. Not always can we sit in these moments of awareness. Sometimes we have to get, we have to get tapped on the shoulder, and hopefully we're working on relationships where that's commonplace. I know I have that with you, and I have that with some key people in my life, and I feel grateful.
Yeah, me too. So, thank you.
I know I went on a tangent, but I just get so passionate about this. I hope our listeners are not knee-night right now.
No, they're not. They're engaged. They're listening, because I am. I'm just waiting for what you're going to say next. I did want to mention
Great, don't bring up Aaron Rodgers. No, I'm just
Then let's talk about Jerry Jones. Just kidding.
Oh, okay.
Okay. While researching for this episode, we also discovered that experience as a leader does not always equate to a higher level of self-awareness. So your experience over time does not necessarily mean you're self-aware. So just because someone, to your point and what I was saying earlier, you're anointed.
Right.
A responsibility does not make you self-aware.
No.
In fact, the longer someone goes without learning about themselves in this way, it can keep us from doing the work that is necessary for growth, seeking advice, and questioning our assumptions. Why? Because we automatically think we've won.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I love that you bring this up, because if you think about it, I didn't value this until literally my late 30s, early 40s is when this revelation came. I'm 51. And I think about it, and that's why we're so committed with this podcast. And now we're expanding this podcast into services to include coaching and resources that can help people with this stuff. Because if we can, if today's 20 and 30 and those coming into those age brackets can embrace the stuff sooner.
Yes.
We are both successful in spite of not knowing it. But when I think about the heartache, when I think of the unnecessary burdens I carried with certain relationships in my life, or relationships with or interactions with people that worked for our company through the years, it was just unnecessary. Again, a burden of a dissatisfaction, and from probably what they were experiencing with me and what I was experiencing with them. And I think this is what this work does for us, is it improves, like we started off the beginning of this episode with, it just improves the relationships. Can you be successful without it? Yes, there's thousands of leaders out there that we could denote that probably weren't very highly internally aware or externally aware that were super successful. And we can all think who those people are right now. We can think of politicians. We can think of business leaders. We can think of, leaders in our community. But the great news is it doesn't have to be that way. And that's why we're committed to this podcast and this work that we're doing, and being vulnerable and saying, really talking through these things. So I love that you brought that up.
And I really want senior leaders in particular. So those of you listening that have been doing this for a while, know this. I'll lump myself into this group. Senior leaders. We tend to have less leaders above us willing to give senior leaders candid and honest feedback. So it's as if the self-awareness journey comes to a halt for them sometimes.
Right.
Alternatively, people who lack external self-awareness found loving critics. It's a quote, let's call them that terminology, loving critics, to give them feedback. These loving critics are people who have their best interest in mind and tell them the truth. So if you're a senior leader, you are just talking about that. You're a senior leader. You have me, you have a couple other people that you trust. They're your loving critics.
Yes.
Because you don't have anyone above you at this business. You don't.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with hierarchy, but I don't need anyone above. Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. You have people in your life that you fully trust. So the revelation here for senior leaders is, if you're finding yourself in this spot, we're either not being led or you just don't have anybody to talk to. We really need to find you somebody that you can trust. And
a lot of that too, because relative to the business, and that's why I'm such a big fan of personal coaching and, professional coaching. And I have an I've worked with a number of coaches through the years, because I did find myself needing that. I needed to know how other leaders were dealing with this, especially those in this seat, which you mentioned, the CEO seat or the founder seat or owner seat, would all the same to me relative to this topic.
Sure.
And so I do. And I think that's why we want to work with people in that capacity too. There's a lot of the coaching that we intend on doing, and it began now, is focused on really this type of work. Because if you can get this part of you right, and you're already, semi-successful in the business, it's only going to improve. It's only going to improve you. So, and I also, listening to what you're saying, it reminded me that the Harvard Business Review study also shared that introspection is often a barrier for internal growth. And that's one of the things that we know to be true because of our own experience. And that's one of the things that we know to be true because of those that we're working with. And it seems counterintuitive, but the study shares that when we are introspective, we ask the question why most to ourselves.
Right.
Why did I make that decision? Why did I say that? Or damn it, I could have done that better. But just by asking the question why, we lead ourselves to many different answers that are likely not true. in other words, their assumptions. And I think that's why they have framed this information is that external is equally important because, again, and this could be Enneagram type, it could be a number of things, but we all have an internal critic. For those 1s and 7, we have 1s and 7s on the Enneagram. We have a really nasty internal critic, but we have it. And when we're just talking to ourselves and we're kind of maybe critiquing ourselves, or maybe we're patting ourselves on the back and we shouldn't be. If we fail to have people that we trust that we can say, I'm not sure how that came across in that meeting. I had to say some really tough things. How did you receive that? If you're not willing to open yourself up and circle back or have that person that's already sitting in the room going, I want to talk about this afterwards, like this, I want you to listen maybe in a different lens from me, or to know that I'm nervous about this topic, or I'm really excited about this brand new thing that I want to share with the team. And, you can't convince me otherwise because I'm so excited. But at the end of the conversation or talk I've had with the team, how many times you've set me down, I was like, I don't think they share your enthusiasm. Maybe it's these things. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't understand you, Danelle, or they don't see the vision like you see it. We need to share this probably 6 or 7 more times in different ways. And I was, oh, that's right. And I know that to be true. Like our role as leaders often is the chief repeat officers. But what we can do, and I know you and I have struggled with this to this point, to keep this point alive, is that we can say, but I've already said that. How many times as parents, as leaders, but I already told the team that once? Well,
I used to say that all the time.
You used to say it all the time. And the reason why you said it all the time is because I said it all the time until we became more externally aware that our role as leaders is to share information not only one time. Mm-hmm. We need to share it multiple times. And it's
not even realistic to think.
It's not. And it's not realistic to tell that with our 8-year-old. Well, yes, I told our 8-year-old, I don't know. So I struggled with it personally and professionally.
Even in baseball, you get 3 pitches. At least.
Look at
right?
You. You are another all sport. Up in the sports today.
Pretty spice. I get 3 strikes in baseball.
Yeah.
So it should at least have, I think you and I decided that 3 to 7 times. Mm. And then we pushed it up to 15. And then we pushed it up to never stop. Just keep saying it.
Yes.
Just keep saying it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this kind of stuff happens to us all the time in leadership. And to your point, relative to this internal awareness and this internal critic and the why question, you and I used to be in the habit, and not just us, I mean, like leaders at this organization and probably others, I'm guessing, is somebody comes in, to the office, and let's say they're having like a bad month, mm-hmm. like something's going wrong every week, and their work seems fine. Everything seems fine. They just seem off, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like they can't get out of this rut. This is life. This is what happens. Mm-hmm. We used to think, oh my gosh, they hate it here. And they're stuck on this thing that we have to do, and they don't want to do it and all mm-hmm. this. We had this internal dialogue where our why answer was pointing the finger at us.
Yeah.
When really, most of the time, sometimes, that was the case. Sometimes people were struggling with the thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people were struggling with just getting started. Mm-hmm. But most of the time people are doing that, it's because of something you absolutely as a leader cannot control. All you can do is help them through it and give them permission to feel.
Right.
And bring to their awareness that they're showing up this way mm-hmm. and that we all know. Exactly. Like we all see that you're going through something. So what is it?
Yeah.
So we asked and encouraged our team to just be forthcoming. Like, trust me, mm-hmm. I'm not going to belabor anything. I just need to know if it's personal or if it's business. If it's business, I can help you. If it's personal, I'm here if you want to talk.
Yeah.
So that's another way for leaders, senior leaders, to combat these types of issues with the why question. Just mm-hmm. don't allow yourself to go down a rabbit hole that can be ruminating and unsolvable. Mm-hmm. Just face it head on, and let's figure out the solutions for your team, for your business, that are going to ultimately help everyone with self-awareness, which ultimately should help you with culture.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to talk about benefits of self-awareness. I feel like we've said them, but just in terms of sort of a wrap up, Danelle, mm-hmm. would you say are the benefits of us being more self-aware?
Yeah, I think, ultimately, you get to know yourself better.
Yeah.
And that's something people usually don't do until they're forced to it, or maybe it's a little bit, they're more mature in their, in their life, or they're at a certain age and they've been struggling. It's a lot of times what I'm saying is it's not voluntary, at least for our generation and those that, came before. I do believe it's becoming more acceptable. If I look at the young people in our organization, they're the champions of a lot of this work. And so that makes me so happy. And they're, I look at the demographics listening to this podcast and it makes me extremely happy. So I think, again, there's extreme value when you know who you are. And honestly, I think it helps with so many other of the emotional struggles to just accept who we are. It doesn't mean we don't do work on, really our incredible strengths and the things that are beautiful about how we're wired, but it's also the things that we can struggle with. And that's okay too. Like, it's okay. It's not okay if you just continue to be on the struggle bus, though. You're going to have limitations to what you're able to achieve in all aspects of your life. So to me, that's the number one benefit, is getting to know you better and accepting yourself for who you are and being committed to owning that, right? And living in that awareness. And then the other one is literally, you can show up better for others because you've listened, you've learned, you've genuinely cared about how others are receiving you. And I think, or experiencing being with you, whatever the dynamic of the relationship is. So, and I think that ultimately what awareness should do, it should be doing, is improving our relationships with others. Mm-hmm. To include, first and foremost, the one we have with ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think that is, the benefits are all the things we've been discussing. But if you wanted to wrap that up, that's what I would say.
And our final question, what resources do you recommend for people on the self-awareness journey? Danelle, I know we have a few. Mm-hmm. Let's give some highlights.
We love, the assessments that we talk a lot about in this episodes, on this podcast, I should say, are, they're paramount, and we use them, and there's so many different ways to continue to learn from them. We love the Ready Enneagram. I don't know, we have 8 episodes on the Enneagram now. So we definitely, that's not a secret. We mentioned archetypes earlier. That was relative to the Harvard Business Review articles, but there's also a test called the Fascination Test. And it literally gives you different archetypes. And it's essentially an assessment to help you understand how other people see you and how they want you to show up. And so, anyway, I won't go too deep into that, but it's called the Fascination Test. Pardon?
If people are working off of first impressions, correct, it tells you how people see you.
Right. Yeah. So it's we actually took that test before we took the Enneagram. So we've been working on our external, in that capacity, we were working on our external. But what's interesting is we kind of kept that information almost in this vein of the work that we do. So we used the information, we had everybody take it, and we used that information to build our bios on the website. Mm-hmm. A good first impression, or we use that on our bios and LinkedIn and stuff. So anyway, that's a good test. We'll put a link to all of this in the show notes. Working Genius, which we absolutely love. That's from the Table Group, Patrick Lencioni and team. And that basically explains, and we have a whole episode on that, but Working Genius is the 6 geniuses that we all possess, and there's 2 that energize us, 2 that we're neutral on, and 2 that drain our energy. So it's good to know that relative to team dynamics. And then the DISC assessment is another one that we love to use, which is your communication style. And then Strength Finders. I think that's pretty common. Most people know that. And I know we get asked this a lot, like, you don't work with the Myers-Briggs. I think most people at the company took the Myers-Briggs through school or through leadership programs that they're going on, but we don't use that necessarily in our internal work, but I know that that's a very popular assessment as well. So I would say those relative to getting to know yourself, but those when you learn that information as a group, you're also learning about others. So it's great to work on your internal awareness, but it's also those are good tools to also initiate the external awareness work that we should be doing. And then I can't say it enough. I mean, therapy, coaching, those are things that I utilize. I know more in our organization are using all of that laundry list of tools as well. So, and I think most of all is building relationships to where, and you mentioned it earlier, making sure that you have plenty, and I don't mean that in quantity sense, but some good loving critics that can help you in all aspects of your life. Like, I was really upset yesterday. How did I show up for that conversation with you, on a personal note? Or, I'm struggling right now. Are you sensing distance from me? It's that simple type of dialogue, but you got to be able to trust that person to tell you the truth. And then, the examples for in the workplace, we've pretty much already touched on those. So.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
This has been a good one. And I want to remind folks to go to beselfsmarter.com. Danelle's mentioned a couple times about coaching is necessary. Tools are necessary. And I just want to remind you, we have some tools and coaching available for you and your teams, available on beselfsmarter.com. Take a look. All right. With that, let's transition to our music moment. Recently, Danelle went to see Brandi in New York, and we haven't talked a ton about it because you were like, I'd rather save it and talk about it for the podcast.
Yeah.
So tell me everything.
So
how much?
First of all, I have friends here who were messaged me and said, are you going to see Brandi? Well, I'm assuming it's Brandi at a music festival because I knew it was in New Jersey or, somewhere close to New York City. I knew it wasn't in Manhattan. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go to a music festival. So I never looked it up. I didn't feel like doing that. And then a friend of mine posted about it, and it was just Brandi Carlile, like her likeness still by herself. And so I was like, wait a minute, what is this? And so I went and bought tickets or looked at tickets, and I realized it was on a college campus about 45 minutes from the city. I took a train, and it was what I would consider a medium-sized venue.
So rad.
Yo, it was incredible. And I was able to snag third row seat tickets, third row middle stage. And so it's just Brandi Carlile, her guitar and her piano. And she played for 2 hours and 15 minutes without stopping. She told stories. She, gloated about her band and the musicians and her family, told these really funny stories and these really emotional stories. But she basically said, and I think this is, there's no secret that we think Brandi Carlile is very self-smarter. But it was self-smarter in the way that she was so internally aware that sometimes she needs to go solo for a show or two to really rekindle and to make sure that she holds the precious value that she has for her entire band and the twins and all the people that make up Brandi Carlile, which is, they made as a band, they decided that was going to be their name early on. But Brandi Carlile is essentially a band. So, but to do these solo performances, it fills her up in a way, and it re-energizes her. And she did a much better job describing that, but it blew me away. It honestly, I heard songs in an acoustic setting that I'd never heard, and just, I don't know, it was just amazing. And so I can't rank all of them, because who can rank Madison Square against Red Rocks because they're just so different. They're not comparable in my mind, even though it's the same artist. But I had wished that, all my Brandi fans could have experienced that. So, and I know she's going to continue to do that. So you just need to look for those shows for those fellow Brandi fans out there. Try to go see one of her solo performances. It makes you appreciate the other shows even more, and then her as an artist.
Amazing.
And her beautiful wife came and sang a couple of songs, which none of us expected, which Kath is if you're a Brandi fan, most of us are big fans of Kath as well. And she's starting to sing a lot more. And the Barbie movie had just released, and Brandi and Catherine's her wife, we call her Kath because we pretend like we already know her, but we don't yet. And they have a song on that soundtrack. So they're covering one of the Indigo Girls songs. So, and it's it's a big part of the movie. So it's really cool.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks for asking. I wanted to gush on our girl Brandi a little bit more.
Well, thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
We're going to share in our stories on Instagram. So if you want to see it, I told Danelle, like the day after she went to the show, I was like, I'm pretty sure Brandi posted pictures or her people posted pictures and you're on the third row. And I was like, yes, I am. So we'll post that picture. We'll take a screen cap and we'll share it on Self Smarter and we'll circle Dee's face smiling from the third row.
Yeah, we'll let our social team, I'll share some of my photos too as well, because they were just incredible because it was all,
you were right there.
Was very intimate. It was a very intimate night. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that'll bring us to a close today. Folks, remember, we're going to have put a lot of things in the show notes today, links, references, statistics that we mentioned today. Be sure to tell a friend, especially a friend that you know that might be in need of a little self-awareness help. Remember to visit beselfsmarter.com if you're interested in coaching or tools to help you on your leadership journey. And until next week, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandi Carlile reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.